Hello and welcome to Ellroy Reads. I'm your host Stephen Powell. I'd like to thank all our new subscribers. If you're watching this show and you haven't subscribed yet, give me a chance. I might just make this your favorite book show on YouTube, and I might just make you want to read and buy Love Me, Fears and Danger, The Life of James Ellroy, my biography of the Demon Dog himself. Okay, I have a wonderful show for you today, and I will be covering an all-time classic of modern American literature, American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Ellis, a little bit about the novel, and then I'll end the show with a story about Ellis and Ellroy and how their lives kind of intersected. Okay, so Bret Easton Ellis was born in 1964 in Los Angeles. His father was a property developer, Robert Ellis, and he's said that his father was something of a monster, an alcoholic and an abusive man. In fact, his father was in some ways the model for Patrick Bateman in American Psycho. Although Ellis has been very, very fluid with regards to his inspirations and influences. He doesn't like to be tied down. Anyway, Ellis was educated at Bennington College, a liberal arts college in Vermont, and that college has played a, shall we say, a walk-on role in the life of James Ellroy, which I'll go into in another episode. At the age of 21, while still a student, Ellis got his first novel, Less Than Zero, published, and it was about disaffected youth in Los Angeles. It was a huge hit critically and commercially, and it put his name on the map, and he became a member of what was known as the Literary Brat Pack, and had a reputation for being a hellraiser, dabbled and indulged in drugs, particularly cocaine. And in many ways, that became something of an influence on American Psycho, which was his third novel. So many of you already know the plot, many of you have seen the film, but it basically is this. It's late 1980s Manhattan. Our lead character, our hero, so to speak, is Patrick Bateman, and he is an investment banker on Wall Street. It's his first-person narration, and he goes into extreme detail as to what the life of an investment banker of his ilk consists of, which is workouts, facial cleansing regimes, life in nightclubs, fancy restaurants, the places to be seen if you're a fashionable figure in New York at the time, business cards, the whole thing. And these are explained in detail that makes him seem extremely shallow, and that this is an incredibly shallow world. Bateman then murders a colleague and takes over his apartment, and then uses that apartment to lure young women, whether they be prostitutes or women he knows, and subsequently murders them too. And each murder is described in increasingly graphic detail, but also dispassionate detail. So there seems to be some sort of contradiction, because in many ways the novel is building up to an orgy of violence. And Bateman is a man who is engaged to a very vapid woman who seems to have no feelings for her whatsoever. In many ways, his sexual expression comes out in these incredibly graphic, violent descriptions. So the novel progresses. It becomes clear that Bateman is in many ways an unreliable narrator. One might say that there is a big twist at the coda, which can be read in any number of ways. I'm not going to give the game away here. What's really interesting about Bateman is the lens he will go to discuss his lifestyle, which, by the way, it implies that there's almost no work that goes into investment banking. I've known a few people who've worked in the City of London, and a lot of work goes into it. But in this world, absolutely no work goes into it. Presumably, deals are hatched over lunch and things like that. But the lunches are portrayed as vapid as anything else. Bateman occasionally diverts into these essays about his musical tastes and his musical heroes. So you have Genesis, Whitney Houston, Huey Lewis and the News. And they're really interesting to read today because I think at the time this was published, and when I first read the novel, which was about 15 years ago, I thought that those artists were really shallow. I thought they would kind of just pop, and I really had a kind of snobby attitude towards them. So I read the book kind of as a snob. Not proud of that now. I mean, but now looking back, I think Genesis are an absolutely legendary band, and I think they achieved a huge amount. But many Genesis fans felt like Phil Collins absolutely ruined that band by turning it into a very, very commercial 80s band. So a lot of the Peter Gabriel fans can't stand him. So I think that's where some of that snobbery comes out. Whereas Bateman is very, very it can discuss, say, Phil Collins in a way that's both analytical and is also full of praise. Whitney Houston now had a sadly premature death, and I'm not saying that a death alone has made me rethink her work, but I do now recognize her as a musical legend. So you heard it here first. American Psycho, helped me stop me from being such a snob. So I've got something. Bret, if you're watching, thank you very much. So the novel is, it's gripping. It is amusing, and it as read as Blackley comic satire more than any kind of real mystery narrative. It's not satisfying as a mystery narrative at all. The gore is incredibly hard to read. It is very transgressive. Reminded me of some of the kind of early Clive Barker in that regard. The Hellbound Heart and that sort of thing. But I felt that the somewhat dispassionate descriptions kind of helped me get through it. That it was a very strange kind of cold orgy in a way. That sounds like a great title, doesn't it? Cold Orgy. And anyway, so when the book came to be published, all the violence and the kind of almost semi-pornographic aspects of the violence became its original undoing. It was to be published by Simon & Schuster, and they pulled out because of aesthetic differences, apparently. But there weren't very many clear press releases back in the early 90s as to what it was, whereas most likely the extreme violence, and Simon & Schuster had been pressured by numerous petitions from women's groups objecting to the violence and the misogyny and the torture that's inflicted on women. The book was then picked up by Alfred A. Knopf and published in paperback by them. It had a somewhat staggered release worldwide because of the violence, but it has, slowly been recognized as a classic and one of Bret Easton Ellis's greatest works. A film adaptation was made in 2000, which again I think has slowly become to be recognized as a classic. The film was directed by Mary Harron, who is a fantastic director. I'd recommend her films. Charlie Says and I Shot Andy Warhol. She's very good at depicting the intersection between the celebrity life and the artistic life of fame and crime. And Christian Bale plays Patrick Bateman and completely owns the part. He seems like he completely submerges himself in Bateman, gets his humor, gets his goofiness, gets his attractive side. And also, his menacing and psychotic side. So, where it all fits in with James Ellroy is that around the time the book was originally pulled, before it got published by Alfred A. Knopf, James Ellroy wrote to Bret Easton Ellis expressing his admiration for the novel, and also, giving him a copy of White Jazz, which was Ellroy's novel, which came out about the same time in 1992. Now, I'm going to read you the letter that Bret Easton Ellis wrote back, and then tell you a little bit what Ellroy told me about the correspondence that they shared. Bear in mind, it might help before I read this letter, James Ellroy had written about serial killers before, most notably and most prominently in 1986 with his novel Silent Terror, which his preferred title is Killer on the Road. In 1990, it was republished in America as Killer on the Road, and ever since it's been known as Killer on the Road. Oddly enough, in the UK, it's still published as Silent Terror. But Ellroy had written about serial killers, so he and Bret Easton Ellis had something in common in terms of the themes they'd approached in the writing. Okay, so here goes the letter. October 1992. Dear Mr. Ellroy, please accept my apologies for not getting back to you sooner. Your kind note, along with a signed copy of White Jazz, arrived while I was back in LA. My father died suddenly in August, and because of complicated legal matters too boring to detail here, I only now, October, have time to, I guess, say thanks back. Though I was blown away by the LA Quartet, I have to admit I hadn't read your earlier books. Though it wasn't exactly the most appropriate novel to read considering my circumstances last August, dealing with sleazebag attorneys and demented trustees and my father's gold-digging 24-year-old girlfriend and whether my father was a suicide or not, an overdose of insulin, questions, major trouble with the IRS. I picked up Killer on the Road, bracket Silent Terror, question mark. It is the best novel about a serial killer that I've ever read, blood-curdling, and the sequence when the two killers first meet and find their common ground in that motel room ranks among the best you have ever written. Excuse me. I have now bought the rest of your books, though I can't find Suicide Hill. So if we have lunch, it's on you. When I was doing publicity in Paris last spring, you were the only American writer journalists would bring up. Take that however you like. Letter writing is not my best mode, and I feel I've blabbed enough. If you're ever in town and want to have lunch with a sycophantic, give me a call. By comparison, my life has been relatively painless, and so fucking boring that you'll have to do all the talking. I'm a quiet, SoCal days, laid-back dude, exactly the kind of blonde kid you probably saw at Fairfax High, roaming idly around wearing hang-ten shirts, eyes perpetually half-closed, and hated. Anyway, because of the hassles mentioned above, I'm in and out of New York on a moment's notice, so if you don't hear back from me for a while, it's my goddamn life's fault. But whatever, here's wishing you the best with White Jazz, and though I hate admitting this to other writers, I'm a big fan. Best, Bret Easton Ellis. And Ellroy was overjoyed with that letter and still remembered it fondly when I was working on his biography, and he subsequently said to Ellis, "Oh, thank you so much, that really made my day. Thank you for the kind comments about Killer on the Road." And Ellis said to him, "Hey, take a line from the letter and use it as a blurb on the book." But Ellroy felt that it didn't quite read as a blurb, so he never did. And I felt like James Ellroy really missed a trick there, because can you imagine the writer of probably the most famous and the most infamous serial killer novel ever published, American Psycho, giving his endorsement to your serial killer novel, published 5 years previously to American Psycho? Can you imagine? I think that would have been a really big story. But I guess for Ellroy, Killer on the Road, Silent Terror, it's never been part of his backlist that he feels really proud about. Therefore, he just let it go, which I felt was a shame. But again, he had, with the LA Quartet, gone into much kind of deeper social history territory, and with American Tabloid and the Underworld USA trilogy, he'd gone into historical fiction, political assassinations, conspiracy theories, government, and I guess he felt embarrassed by the whole serial killer thing and his dabbling with it. But he really did like American Tabloid. So he really did like American Psycho, and that's my recommendation for this week. Bret Easton Ellis' American Psycho. It still holds up. It's still a very powerful, shocking novel, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay, see you next time. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share this show with your friends, loved ones, neighbors, even your enemies. Okay, see you again. Bye-bye.